welcome contagion bearers and plague spreaders to the diseased heart of the mortal realms as we continue our dive into the virulent world of the Skaven clans. Today we're going to be focusing on one of the most feared and detested amongst them, the Clans Pestilens. And while we've previously explored the very conventional side of Skaven, dumb warfare, meaning like the endless hordes of verminous, Clans Pestilens is a festering wound that refuses to heal, spreading corruption and decay wherever they tread. Unlike some clans whose power lies in their sheer numbers or their technological prowess, Pestilens thrives on the unholy might of disease, rot, and religious fervor. The plague priests, who are the leader echelon of these Skaven, are not content with simple conquest. They seek nothing less than the total infection, desecration, and desolation of the mortal realms. They view diseases, especially virulent ones, as divine gifts from the great horned rat. They see him as the desolator, the ruin of all the realms. And so today we are going to continue our exploration of the Skaven clans by diving into the filth and squalor of Clans Pestilens, from the lowliest plague monk to the highest plague priest. We're going to uncover the units that were thrown into this new book, how you can build an army around them, and really just explore their unique blend of religious zealotry and biological warfare that makes them a force unlike any other in Age of Sigmar. Now, one thing I'd like to add right up top, if you like this video and you're interested in Skaven, please consider using any of the affiliate links in my description down below. Using those links, you'll see exactly how much money you save, and every time you do, a tip goes in my tip jar that directly supports me, my wife, our cats, the whole channel, and I am so deeply thankful for all of you. Also, the wonderful dudes over at Baron of Dice have come up with 2+ tough custom dice. If you want to support me and get some dice for yourself, please consider checking that link out in the description down below. Lastly, Goonhammer is a fantastic resource online. They have a blog where there's tons of resources on how to play, build guides, painting tutorials, and one of their members, Campbell, has actually started Goonhammer TV here on YouTube with ancillary content. It's not replacing the blog, but it's just in addition to, so go support him and check him out. Now, one of the things that I love about Skaven when it comes to understanding the depictions of them in lore, to me, you can read a third-person perspective about how the rats operate, but really the feeling of fighting Skaven comes from the perspective of whoever they're attacking. And I used this example before in previous videos. Just imagine that you are a guard on a wall, and this enemy is coming at you. What does that guard feel, or see, or hear? In the case of the Clans Pestilens, you're probably going to smell them before you see them. There's an acrid stench of decay filling the air. You'll hear them hacking and coughing, screaming, because half of them have rabies and they're just absolutely mad. You'll hear church choir style music, because again, it's a religious procession. And as they come into the view, it's not the sight of rusted weapons or ragged clothing that strikes fear into your heart. It's basically that every breath you take is infected in some way. Every time you breathe, you're inhaling the death that they worship. The Clans Pestilens are not content with victory on the battlefield. They seek to leave a legacy of corruption that's going to linger long after swords are put down, right? They want to cleanse and scour the realms. Their internal strife may keep them from achieving ultimate dominance, but they do manage to unite their forces. The result is a religious persecution wave of the Skaven and a desecrating of anything that stands in their way. Now, as we mentioned in the Verminous video, how their particular clans operate and how they are reared raises a specific type of warlord. The same is true for Clans Pestilens. Whereas the Clawlords have this kind of faux military sense, right? Might makes right. The theme or facade of the Clans Pestilens is that of a church. The Great Horned Rat is not an abstract deity to them. He's a character whose motives and desires can be understood by following his teachings and tenets. And so in this microcosm of Skavendom, they elevate great orators, crusaders, zealots, and so on. They're still playing the same, backstabbing game as the other clans. These are not turn the other cheek kind of religious folks. This is like, I cleave thee in the name of king and country kind of religious folks. But even just that sets them apart in Skavendom. Because while they do participate in the greater Skaven politics that we discussed earlier this week, they don't really like other Skaven, and other Skaven don't really like them. Other Skaven see the Clans Pestilens as generally uncooperative, even by Skaven standards, and too self-focused on their, we'll call them missionary trips. Not to mention that anytime there's a civil war amongst the Skaven, the poisonous fumes that Clans Pestilens uses in their attacks usually kill way more than you'd expect. They kind of hit above their weight class because of the poisonous nature of their weapons. Because in a warren full of rats, the one with the largest can of exterminator spray is king. But likewise, the Clans Pestilens have their own political game amongst the religious leaders of their church. Like, they have their own organization, so much so that they're not really bothered by the others. They obviously contribute to the greater political scene, but they really do have their own, again, microcosm within Skavendom. And just like with Verminous, where Skaven need to bully a group into achieving something, and that's kind of the start of a warband, the same is true here. Some Skaven will claim a divine vision, rally a congregation into a zealous act of martial achievement, and then begin escalating through the ranks of the church. Like I said, same format, different vibe, different skin. And on the topic of what this Skaven church wants, to put it simply, these clans began when some Skaven long ago injected himself with some form of disease. It's kind of been lost to time, but this disease made them more strong, it made them more intense. I think rabid would be an apt word here. And overall, it made them much more dangerous in combat, so this Skaven did well. Towards the end of their lives, as the illness progressed, they began to proclaim direct visions from the Great Horned Rat. Essentially, they're losing their mind to the disease. These visions include a world that is scoured by plague, where only the Skaven and the rats below them scurry over the bones of their enemies. That is the foundational moment of Clans Pestilens, right? The mission of the church is to use biological weapons to scour the realms clean and make it an ideal home for the Great Horned Rat. Now, as far as a purpose goes, right, on the day-to-day level, since that initial infected Skaven myth, the religion has proliferated. It has religious texts and teachings added, and even had deified teachings from contagion-addled Skaven claiming visions. These books are called the Liber Pestilent, a set of ancient religious tomes amongst the Clans Pestilens, which were lost throughout the ages, and each one of them is a part a recipe guide, part Bible, part fever dream. Within these tomes, or these religious texts, are also guides for creating what are called Great Plagues. These are crews of contagion that are so dangerous in lethality that they are nearly mythical. It is thought by the church leaders that once all the Great Plagues are brewed and unleashed in a single event, the great day of scouring will come, where the Great Horned Rat will wipe the realms clean. So far, the greater Clans Pestilens all combined have found 9 out of the 13 Great Plagues. And it's also important to note, each one of these things is super hard to make, so even if you find the book, that doesn't mean they can actively make all 9 on demand. Some of the ingredients are exceptionally rare or hard to come across, or you have to improvise a replacement. It's a lot of work. So that's kind of how they are at a high level. Let's start investigating the Clans Pestilens more by going through the various units that they have access to. Starting off with the Plague Priest. Now, at the heart of the Clans Pestilens are these Plague Priests, the leaders we mentioned, the twisted clergy of the Horned Rat. They are far less concerned with martial prowess and more focused on spreading disease and corruption in the name of their god, and they lead their followers in prayers and rituals. They unleash plagues as much as they can, and are constantly using their oratory skills to whip up a fervor amongst their followers. Whereas other Skaven leaders might be motivated by personal power or survival, a Plague Priest, when it gets into a real religious experience, is consumed by faith. A faith that will sacrifice anything to achieve its end. So even if you die getting one of the Great Plagues going, that's worth it. And to complement this, this great orator and wielder of Skaven, sometimes they need a ride. The Pope has the Pope-mobile, but the Plague Priest, he flexes by riding a plague furnace into battle. Essentially, it's a vortex of all their most lethal concoctions. Think of it as a giant cauldron that you can swing as a weapon. It's peak War Machine with a dude on top going, drive forward so I can hit them with my sword. And really, that's the only leader there is. I'm going to do a dedicated video for the Vermin Lords. They do have a Vermin Lord, the Corruptor. But as far as like actual Skaven leaders, that's all there is. However, there are several units below them, the most widespread of which are the Plague Monks. Rank and file of the Clans Pestilens are the Plague Monks, teeming masses of crazy fanatics who spread disease and decay wherever they can. They form the backbone of Clans Pestilens armies. They're driven by all kinds of disease. All their weapons are rusted and crude, and they tend to be highly infectious. Remember, they're injecting themselves with diseases, so even if you fight them, if you take even a tiny scratch, you're going to have a bad time afterwards. Next up is the Plague Pack. This is kind of a newer unit that we've gotten in the last year or two, I believe. Essentially, these are swinging massive smoke-belching sensors filled with all kinds of toxins. This is essentially like the elite guard of the Plague Priests. Skaven so infected with disease that they kind of go into a full delirium. Sometimes the priest can nudge their visions to basically make the priest god himself, meaning that this crazy Skaven would do anything to protect their leader because now you're built into their fantasy. So if you're the Plague Priest, you get a bunch of these guys, you basically inject them with diseases so they don't have rational thinking, you present yourself as a deity, and now you have this sort of delusional loyalty, which is loyalty nonetheless, so that a Skaven can, dare I say, trust his subordinates. Doesn't always work out for them, but that's essentially the idea. You make them so frothing at the mouth that they can't make their own plans and machinations. Finally, we have the Plague Claw Catapult, a war machine that lobs disease-ridden corpses and filth into the ranks of the enemy. It is a testament to the ingenuity and depravity of Clans Pestilens, and essentially, this is their siege weapon. They don't need a weapon that can go through the walls if they can poison everybody inside them without having to raise an arm. Now, one thing that was added in this last battle tome, I love. It's a fun story about the Plague Claw origins. It says the catapult was first designed as an answer to Clans Scryer's ranged combat domination. It's basically all the Plague Priests being like, we can hit stuff far away too, you're not special. And there's a specific story that the Plague Priests love to bring up to Scryer warlocks, known as the Battle of Blood Spew. In short, there was an elven fortress that a Scryer army just could not break into. They would fire off the Warp Lightning Cannon, Storm Fiends were there, all their new models, all rolling sixes. Nothing was breaking the wards of this particular fortification. Then the Clans Pestilens rolled up on the nearby hill with just an absolute wall of catapults, and they lobbed plagues over the fort and essentially corroded the wards away, so that by the time they collapsed, the Skaven could enter, and boom, all the defenders were just pools of blood and ichor. So this is basically how the Clans Pestilens get a rise out of the warlocks. Oh, you have guns. But you know what? Our enemies are ready for guns. You know what they're not ready for? Mutabu. Or whatever disease they feel like hurling over the wall that day. Shout out in the comments if you get that joke. And so I want to end this video like I end all of them. Why is Clans Pestilens cool? Well, it's Skaven in a different lens, which is always fun. If you don't know, if you're newer to the game, Clans Pestilens used to be its own full faction, but the game was getting bloated, and so they brought it back into, general Skavendom, which I like where it is now, partially because of where they fit into kind of the overall Skaven ecosystem. Now, one question I see a lot in the comments is how do they pair or contrast with Nurgle? Are they allies? Are they enemies? And the answer is yes. Chaos factions are a lot like Venn diagrams. You can always find some place where they overlap. Some situation or event where their desires or their methods are mutual. This is such an instance. Nurgle is the god of plagues, disease, and despair. The Clans Pestilens use biological weapons like plagues. So how are they different? To me, the real difference is in the goals. Nurgle wants to divide, the Great Horn Rat wants to subtract. And what I mean by that is, when Nurgle assaults a city with plagues, it is for the purpose of creating despair in the mortals at a cycle of life they can't control. One person, when dead, is host to billions of lives in the form of microbes and bacteria. He divides one life into many. And as such, his depiction, within his realm of chaos is a vibrant garden full of all kinds of growths and organisms and so on. Of course, they're all chaosy and corrupted, but that's his perception. In contrast, the Clans Pestilens are not looking to turn the great wheel of life, so to speak. Their post-battle scenes are not verdant gardens of plague flowers and stuff. It's dark, it's lifeless earth that is nearly uninhabitable to all flora and fauna. It's the difference between breaking something down and scouring out of existence. Plagues of such intensity that they're intended to burn themselves out with just how virulent they are, whereas Nurgle would be much happier to have a not as deadly plague that spreads everywhere. For the Skaven, it's a means to an end. If Nurgle, in a dark, humorous kind of way, is the god of life and rebirth, the Great Horned Rat is the god of scouring and ruin. So you'll see depictions and stories of like Maggotkin of Nurgle forces in fighting or doing a siege or whatever, and Clans Pestilens show up. The Venn diagram overlap is that their diseases don't really affect one another. They have some level of immunity. But as anyone with a job can tell you, just because you have a coworker and you're assigned to the same task does not mean you are on the same team. Every Claw Lord is looking for a way to stab the Maggotkin of Nurgle warlord in the back. Every time you hear a Maggotkin of Nurgle, leader chant a praise to Nurgle, the plague priests are cussing because the glory should be going to the Great Horned Rat, and so they're constantly, again, friction. Sometimes they're enemies, sometimes they can work together. They do overlap a lot, I'm not going to deny that. I just think the end goal is different. It seems like Nurgle wants to proliferate the most life possible by dividing it, and the Great Horned Rat, at least through Clans Pestilens' eyes, use disease to eradicate. But I would love to know your thoughts. Please leave them down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'm excited to keep continuing our coverage of Skaven. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.